Hi, I'll continue with forward back to class. It was the third Tuesday after school had started, and Mrs. Khan was taking the register. She was just about to call my name when there was a loud knock at the door. Usually when there's a knock at the door, it's just someone from another class bringing a note, so no one really pays any attention. But this time it was Mrs. Sanders, the head. Mrs. Sanders always wears her hair in the exact same way and peers over her glasses whenever she talks to anyone. Everyone is scared of her because when she gives detention, she doesn't just make you sit in a room, she makes you memorise long words from the dictionary and doesn't let you leave until you've learnt them all off by heart. The meaning and the spelling. I've even heard of lower graders being stuck in detention for hours because they had to learn words that were as long as this page. So when we saw that it was Mrs. Sanders at the door, we all felt silent. She looked very serious as she walked up to Mrs. Khan, and we all wondered who was in trouble. After she had whispered and nodded for a few seconds, she suddenly turned around and, peering over her glasses at us, pointed to the empty chair at the back of the class. All of us turned around to have a look at the empty chair. This was the chair. As I said, it was a pretty ordinary chair, and it was empty because of a girl called Dina left our class at the end of last year to move to Wales. No one really missed her except for her best friend Clarissa. Dina had been a bit of a show-off and was always talking about how many presents her parents got her every week and how many pairs of trainers she had and all sorts of other things that no one else really cared about. She liked to sit at the back of the class because then she and Clarissa could pretend to be doing lessons when really they were drawing pictures of their favourite pop stars and giggling about someone they didn't like. Someone else could have taken that seat, but no one really wanted to sit next to Clarissa. That's why the chair had stayed empty. After whispering for a few more seconds with Mrs. Khan, Mrs. Sanders left the room. We expected Mrs. Khan to say something, but before we could all start, but she seemed to be waiting, so we waited too. It was all very serious and exciting, but before we could start guessing about what was going on, Mrs. Sanders came back, and this time she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a boy none of us had ever seen before. He had short dark hair and large eyes that hardly blinked and smooth pale skin. "Everyone," said Mrs. Khan as the boy went and stood next to her. "This is Ahmet, and he'll be joining our classroom today. He's just moved to London and is new to the school, so I hope you'll all do your best to make him feel welcome." We all watched in silence as Mrs. Sanders led him to this empty chair. I felt sorry for him because I knew he wouldn't like sitting next to Clarissa very much. She still missed Dina, and everyone knew she hated boys. She says they're stupid and smell. I think it must be one of the worst things in the world to be new to a place and have to sit with people you don't know, especially people that stare and scowl at you like Clarissa was doing. I made a secret promise to myself right there and then that I would be friends with the new boy. I happened to have some lemon sherbets in my bag that morning, and I thought I would try and give him one at break time, and I would ask Josie and Tom and Michael if they would be his friends too. After all, having 4 new friends would be much better than having none, especially for a boy who looked as scared and as sad as the one now sitting at the back of our class. Chapter 2. The Boy with Lion Eyes. For the rest of the day I kept sneaking glances over my shoulder at the new boy and noticed that everyone else was doing the same. Most of the time he kept his head down low, but every so often I'd catch him staring right back at us. He had the strangest coloured eyes I'd ever seen, like a bright ocean but on a half sunny, half cloudy day. They were grey and silvery blue with specks of golden brown. They reminded me of a program I'd seen about lions once. Pomegranate. The camera operator had zoomed into a lion's face so much that its eyes had taken up the whole screen. The new boy's eyes were like those lion eyes. They made you want to never stop staring. When Tom joined our class last year, I had stared at him a lot too. I didn't mean to, but I kept imagining that he came from an American spy family, like the ones you see in the movies. He told me that later that he had thought there was something wrong with me. The new boy probably thought there was something wrong with me too, but it's hard to stop staring at new people, especially when they have the eyes like a lion. We had geography the first period that morning, so we couldn't get up to say hello to the new boy. Then at break time I looked around the playground for him, but couldn't see him anywhere. In the second period we had PE, but the new boy didn't join in. He sat in the corner staring at his rucksack, which was red with a black stripe on it and looked very dirty. I thought he must have forgotten his PE kit because his bag looked empty and saggy. I tried waving at him, but he never looked up, not even once. Whenever we do PE, I like to pretend that I'm training to join Tintin on an adventure and have to be the super fastest human being on the planet. The only problem is my legs aren't as long as I want them to be yet, so even if I jump as hard as I can, I always get stuck in the middle of the vault. Every birthday I make a wish that I'll grow at least 4 inches taller, and I drink as much milk as I can so that my bones will stretch. But even though I'm 9 3/4 now, I've only grown 1.5 inches since my last birthday, or at least that's what my mum says. I tried my best to jump over the vault in one go in front of the new boy, but I got stuck again. Luckily he didn't see me because he was staring at his rucksack the whole time. After PE, we had lunch break, and Josie, Tom, Michael and me decided we would try and find the new boy so that he wasn't all on his own. We waited right next to the playground doors, but the new boy never came out. Tom even went to check the boys' toilets, because that's where he had tried to hide on his first day, when he didn't know anyone. But there was no one there. Maybe he's having lunch with the lower grades by mistake, said Josie. But when we got into the lunch hall, we couldn't see him anywhere. In the afternoon we had history, and we were split into groups, but the new boy was allowed to sit on his own and not join us. Mrs. Kahn spent more time with him than she did with any of our groups, and she was pointing at things in the new workbook she had gotten him. Maybe he's deaf, someone whispered. Maybe he can't speak English, muttered someone else. There's definitely something wrong with him, whispered everyone. That afternoon, I don't think any of us learnt what it was like to be a gladiator living in Roman times, because we were all too busy whispering about the new boy. He must have known we were doing it, because his face was red the whole time. Then, at last break, he disappeared again. He must be inside, said Michael, after we had finished searching the whole playground. For the 3rd time in a row. By now, my lemon sherbets were getting sticky in my pocket and beginning to look like bright yellow fuzzballs. At home time, everyone was still talking about the new boy and wondering who he was. I think it was because a whole day had passed, and no one knew anything about him except for his name. Not even Clarissa, and she had been sitting next to him the whole time. People kept running up to her to ask if the new boy had said anything to her, but she just shook her head and said that he was using a lower year workbook, so his reading and writing mustn't be very good. On our way to the bus stop, we saw everyone crowding around Jeannie just outside the front gates. Jeannie is famous in school for always knowing something about everything, so we ran over to hear what she was saying. Jeannie is in the class next door, and she has the longest hair in school. She likes to spy on people and then tell stories about them to other people. Sometimes the stories are true, but most of the time they're only half true, because she makes things up. Last year she told a story about Josie cheating in a football match by pretending to fall down so she'd get a penalty kick. But I was there, and so was Tom, and we both saw her fall down after being kicked in the leg by an upper boy called Robert. She had a big fat bruise on her leg the shape of Australia for weeks afterwards. But no matter how many times we showed everyone the bruise and told them what really happened, no one really believed us. Not even the people that were there. Sometimes I think everyone likes to believe a lie, even when they know it's a lie, because it's more exciting than the truth. And they especially like to believe that if it's printed in a newspaper. I know that now. I also know why Mum says politicians are liars and always shouts at them whenever they come on telly. Maybe Jeannie will be a politician when she grows up. When we got closer, we heard Jeannie telling everyone that the new boy had spent all of his break times with Mrs. Sanders because he had done something bad in his old school and was too dangerous to be let out into the playground with us. But I didn't believe her. I could tell Michael didn't believe her either, because he asked her how she knew so much about it. Jeannie got angry and crossed her heart and hoped to die, and said that she'd heard Mr. Owen talking to Mrs. Timms outside the teacher's staff room, and that both of them had said how sorry they felt for Mrs. Kahn, and how glad they were that the new boy wasn't in their class, because it wasn't going to be easy to deal with. But before we could ask her any more questions, Jeannie's dad began to beep at her from his car, so she ran off. We all watched her go, and then looked back through the school gates to see if the new boy had come out, but we couldn't see him anywhere. He's probably left already, said Josie. Tom and Michael nodded. Let's just wait 2 more minutes, I said, hoping that he would still be inside. And I was glad I did, because a few seconds later the new boy came out into the playground. He was holding Mrs. Kahn's hand and staring at the ground. A woman who was waiting by the outdoor benches suddenly shouted, "Cooey!" and ran over to them. She was wearing a long brown overcoat, a woolly hat, and a bright red scarf. She stood and talked to Mrs. Kahn for a long time and nodded an awful lot, but we couldn't hear anything because we were standing too far away. I wonder if that's his mum, said Josie. I didn't think so, because the new boy didn't hug her at all, and seemed shy around her too. "Come on," said Michael. He was pointing to his watch, which was beeping like a submarine. Michael had a special watch that tells him when the next bus is coming. It's meant to help him get to places on time, but I've only ever seen it make him bump into things more quickly. "No, wait," I said, and before I could think about it too much, I ran over to where the new boy was standing. "Hello," I said, tapping him on the shoulder. Mrs. Khan and the woman in the red scarf looked down at me as I reached into my pocket and got out the lemon sherbet. "Here," I said, holding it out. I was a little bit embarrassed because by now the sherbet was covered in fluff, but it was still good enough to eat. That's the good thing about lemon sherbets. No matter how bad they look, they always still taste delicious. I think I must have spoken too loudly, because the new boy took a step away from me as though he was frightened. "It's all right, Ahmet. You can take it," said the woman, motioning to him with her hands as if she was speaking in sign language. But the new boy grabbed her hand and hid his face behind her arm. I didn't know what to do, because I've never really scared anyone so much before that they wanted to hide away from me. The woman spoke to him gently again, and after a few seconds he took the sherbet and looked straight at me with his lion eyes before hiding away again. "Thank you," said the woman. She looked at me and gave me a smile. I liked her deep brown eyes because they seemed kind, and her bright pink cheeks. But what I liked best of all was how her long blonde hair swirled around in the wind from underneath her hat. "Ahmet will enjoy that on the ride home," she said. I nodded and then ran back to where Josie and Tom and Michael were waiting for me. I felt extra happy because Mrs. Khan had smiled at me with her whole face and had given me a wink too, just like my dad used to do whenever he thought I had done something good, or when he was teasing my mum. When I'm a grown-up, I'm going to wink at people just like he used to do, and make them feel special too. And as we made our way home, I decided that the next day, whenever I saw the new boy staring at me, I was going to give him just as many winks as I could.